Today we're going to do my top 10 favorite and least favorite / hated characters in the Sun Eater series. In order to make this an effective list, obviously there has to be spoilers. Spoilers about all the way up to book 7 because it's relevant and I think necessary to make that kind of video. Number 10 is going to be Ramanzao. I don't know how to correctly pronounce that, and that's going to be the Ciel scene that joins Hadrian Marlowe's conclave in book 6 in the Disquiet Gods. And the reason I put him at number 10 here is because I really enjoyed that kind of, I don't know, Ciel scene arc where obviously Hadrian Marlowe is now, gets like a Ciel scene to see him as someone who can combat his gods and is extremely, utterly loyal. And part of why I really loved him, and part of me is really disappointed, is that arc where part of Hadrian Marlowe's innocent dream at the very beginning somewhat becomes a reality, that the Ramanzao's partner, I forget the name, they have a baby, right? And the baby ends up not having the same behaviors. So that was a really interesting, I was disappointed that was in book 7, because I think there was a lot of cool development there, and that that kind of whole development and little side quest or side narrative that was happening was really interesting. And I was very invested in the Ciel scene in books 1 through 3 or books 1 through 4, seeing that, oh, okay, so perhaps the gods don't have that grip on the Ciel scene, and that maybe part of Hadrian Marlowe's dream was not so naive. I was hoping that it was going to go in that route. It didn't, but I still enjoyed, quite really enjoyed Ramanzao, and just his utter loyalty to Hadrian, based on this, and him somewhat kind of learning the human ways, and that kind of little development was cool to see. So number 10 for my most hated / disappointing, I'm actually gonna have to put the Ciel scene here. Books 1 through 4, really enjoyed that, especially book 4, like the in-depth of the Ciel scene and just seeing their culture and how they're formed, and then you find out they're somewhat being manipulated by the Watchers, was really cool and interesting to see. But their arc becoming just kind of more of the evil antagonist was just highly disappointing. And I don't know, like them having to be wiped out, it's just too much of that good versus evil, where especially based on the content of this universe, I was disappointed. And the ending with Doriaika, I'm still not sure exactly what happened there at the end, to be honest with you. But yeah, the Ciel scene's arc was quite disappointing for me. I would have loved to have seen some, I don't know, like we got that with Ramanzao, however you say his name, but the Ciel scene as a whole just became too much good and too much of the evil, when everything in this universe is super morally gray. So yeah, that and then they kind of took a backseat, and they just became the, how do you say, the grunts of the Watchers, that's why there's so much there, so that's why I think that it was disappointing. Number 9 for most loved is gonna have to be Mr. Olorin / the Prince of Jad. I really, from book 1, I always said that I loved his character. He gives Hadrian his first sword, and we don't run into him, I think, until book 5, when it's revealed that he's actually probably the second most powerful man in that empire. And it was surprising, and it was rewarding that that I had some investment in Olorin. I was hoping that there would be some kind of comeback towards in some part of the series, and pleasantly surprised that he's actually the Prince of Jad. And yeah, I love his character, and he's a great representation of Jad, and the world building obviously in Sun Eater is awesome. Every piece of this universe feels distinct. The Jad feel distinct, extra Solarians, the different factions within the extra Solarians. The Empire feels unique. The Ciel scene feel unique. So a lot of these different aspects feel unique, and just Aloran being the fulcrum of that, you know, the ultra representation of that, and just, you know, having some cool moments. Obviously having Hadrian's back, and also if I wasn't a huge fan of the short stories, but there's a short stories with Aloran's when Hadrian is on Jad and Cassandra. There's like an attempted assassination on him or Cassandra, and just that interaction and them trying to kill also, I think, the Prince of Jad, was it too? So just that whole stuff, that was a great short story. I was very pleasantly surprised by that one, so give that one a look. But anyway, yeah, love the Jad, love Aloran, him always having Hadrian's back, but more, you know, it's not so like utter loyalty, right? Devout loyalty, but it's more from just based on Hadrian's character. He knows him very well, and it's probably because he knew him at its start. He knows that it's not power that's driving Hadrian, because he knew him from the beginning. So none of those kinds of dark suspicions come into play for Aloran, because he put Hadrian on his journey, so he knows him very well, and he knows that that's not his ambition. So that's why you gotta love Aloran. Number 9 is gonna be Mr. Leonard Bartosz, and this is just because I hate him, not because he's a badly written character, has a bad arc. I mean, this man still has power. He did an absolute horrific, terrible job in book 3. Was it book 3? Yeah, where he just completely falls under the pressure of command, and Lorien has to save the day, and this guy just still comes around up until book 7. He's still around and still has power, and it just shows that genetics is everything in this society. Genetics is the hierarchy, and doesn't matter what you do, if you're related to the emperor in some way, or you're gonna get preferred treatment, and even if you're utterly disappointing. But God, I hated that he kept popping up somehow and being in book 7 being, Hadrian's a traitor, and I'm like, this mother, like, you out of everybody. So number 8 for most loved is gonna be Mr. Basander Lin. He had a really cool arc, really good placement in this series. You know, you start off with him he goes on this mission, and then eventually kind of betrays Hadrian to the point where, you know, it really ruins what could have potentially been a great ally and maybe a different arc. And so his transformation to being devout, like, his character is always, you cannot question his loyalty. You cannot question his faithfulness. And so when he sees something he knows has to be done from a higher power, it makes him utterly transform for Hadrian. And I think that arc was quite cool, and seeing how he's had his back and that little transformation is according to character, and Hadrian probably doesn't respect it as much as he should, but no matter what Hadrian says, Basander doesn't let that change his opinion of him. And just the ending, right, where the ending is Hadrian asking him, like, hey, you have to give me up. And yeah, and like, he's just loyal to the end. So you just have to love Basander, that he's doing what he believes is right, and he says that he's his true self to the end, all of his years. So that's why I really enjoyed. I just enjoyed Basander's character and that conflict from books 1 to 3 between him and Hadrian. Enjoyable to read. Number 8 for most hated and disappointed, you got to give it to Here Soon Changed. I don't know. I just felt it was a huge deus ex machina. Like, you have this, out of all of the ones that they took hostage of the extra Solarians, it happens to be the guy that's like able to fight one of the daemons through being hooked into the computer. I don't know. It felt too convenient for the plot. And him and Orphan, and I wasn't a big fan of Orphan anyway. It felt too convenient, but yeah, Here Soon Changed. Like Orphan, I'm willing to accept, but Here Soon Changed, way too convenient. And there were some tidbits of information. I mean, I thought it was cool that he was like one of the very first Chantry. That was cool, but would have liked to have seen more of like what that means for him and stuff like that. And you know, of course, with the Extrasolarians, you're going to get a bit of mythical strangeness, let's say. And I was okay with that. But the moment it was like he's so powerful that he can fight a daemon, I'm like, I don't know. It felt too convenient for me, and not enough of the good stuff. Number 7, I'm going to have to put, it's cheating, but my list. Number 7, I really got to put Lorien and Octavia, just because they're in some ways one and the same for me. Number 7 for most loved, Lorien and Octavia. Lorien, just his character arc and his attachment to Hadrian. Though some of the ending stuff was a bit disappointing, but no, just his arc, right? Like him being an Intis, and you see how he transforms into the commander, and him having that practicality and how do you say, like he's unemotional in his commanding decision making, and I really enjoyed the novella about him, and I thought it was, I wish we had more of that in the main series, just that kind of character development. But it's true, some of his character development happens off book or off script, off screen, we can say, but just, yeah, that transformation of who he becomes and his love for Valka, his love of Hadrian, and who he becomes, who he is, and it was all very gratifying. And Octavia, also, her short story in one of the Tales of the Sun Eater was cool to read. I wish we had more of that. Her being that kind of badass commander, and also kind of in a way putting Hadrian in his place, Lorien too in a way, but just her, how she meets her ending, her demise, her being badass. I always enjoyed her on paper, her on screen, so cool to read. Number 7 for most disappointing, least favorite, I gotta put Valka from books 3 to 5. And I know people are Valka lovers, and I am too, for books 1 through 2. But books 3 through 5, she became way too dependent on Hadrian, especially because, right, her life's work was, and maybe it's more book 4 through 5 that's more disappointing, but I had to throw book 3 because she becomes so dependent on Hadrian once, and I have to say, I love the relationship between the two, right? It's not, you don't see some unnecessary, love tension between the two that kind of ruins it. Like, the relationship between the two, there's no problem, but when Valka becomes dependent on him, what I mean is that her life's work became her understanding of the quiet, her intelligence, her research, and when Hadrian's discovery just kind of throws her stuff out the window, there's not a lot of room for her anymore, for her development or her arc or her, like, why is she there other than her love and loyalty to Hadrian? And that tension between the two was always enjoyable to read, is that she needs purpose. And when the discovery of the quiet kind of throws everything she's researched out the window, it never felt that it was replaced. And it felt like she was always just the loyal lover, concubine of Hadrian. And it just always felt unsatisfying based on the strength of her character on books 1 through 2 and what she meant to the company and these kinds of things. So I don't want to say she was useless, of course not, but it was on that line. So yeah, it was not, I was disappointed in that. I would have liked to have seen, and also her ending was highly telegraphed in Ashes of Man. I mean, and telegraphing is okay in some sense, or foreshadowing is okay, but when you're not having a meaningful arc, I always think of Theon Greyjoy, right? Like, it was quite telegraphed that he was going to meet his end, but it was extremely gratifying based on the journey and him finding a new purpose, right? And obviously Theon is way different. Theon Greyjoy from Game of Thrones is very different than Valka. But when a character when the character loses their purpose based on the circumstances of the plot, and they find something new that's justified, it's extremely gratifying character arc. And maybe Valka's wasn't that extreme, but it kind of was based on the ending of Kingdom of Death. It was just disappointing to read, especially 4 and 5. Number 5 for most loved in the Sun Eater series, maybe it's cheating a little bit, but just the Lothrians as a character. I loved the Lothrians in book 4, and man, do I wish we had more of them. The Lothrians in book 4 were one of the most enjoyable societies, that just the way that the censorship to the extreme and its grip on hierarchy and power and those things interchanging and the way they speak and how that's the conformingness and conformity and just everything. I just loved everything about the Lothrians. I really overly enjoyed let me wait through these. Got some people on the motorcycle here. I just thoroughly enjoyed the Lothrians arc. It was extremely satisfying. So that was super cool to read, Kingdoms of Death, and a little bit of surprising too. Like, I didn't expect them to put their own people, but when it's kind of like the ends justify the means, or the means justify the ends, that's them to the extreme. So that was why super cool. Number 5 for most disappointing or hated, I have to put Orphan, because Orphan is cool concepts, but super convenient character, right, for the arc. And I know that the series at this point is really going for really diving more into the how do you say it, more deep into the extra Solarian and the daemons and kind of the hyper super intelligence. But it was just too convenient at this point. And I'm okay with the extra Solarians. I don't have any issues with them, but it was just, sometimes it was just a bit too, Orphan was just a bit too convenient and not a meaningful character arc for them at all. And I don't know, just, we got how they came in to guide the ship, and I get that it's because the daemon was providing the most likely scenario for Hadrian to succeed, but at the same time, for Orphans specifically, there wasn't much to them, and they took a lot of space in the story. So I don't really have much more to say, but for me, it was just disappointing. They were much too convenient for me. Number 4 for most loved, and they could even be higher, is you have to put the Chantry. The Chantry is awesome. The whole development, the arc of the Chantry, the revelations up until book 7. My goodness, I didn't even see that coming, that they're actually holding on to Earth for themselves, and that they possess more technology than that shock Harn Sagara probably, right? So that the Chantry as a world building mechanism, and they even have their own arc, and they kind of are, and they're victorious at the end. Like, I had no problem with that kind of ending where the Chantry in the end are kind of victorious. That in itself was not an issue. But yeah, the Chantry is super cool. From book 1, you're terrified of them and what they're capable of, and they're super mysterious, mythical, but in the end, it shows they have their own extreme shadow government, and the different themes at play, and they're very thought-provoking on religion and the power of belief and the control of belief and what that means and what power you can exude from that. That's why you have to put the Chantry. Just super cool. Props to Rocchio. I love the Chantry and the Empire and everything about that. Every time they were on page, I thoroughly enjoyed, and the fact that they do have a daemon, and then the different politicking with them, all very, very enjoyable. You have to thoroughly enjoy. Yeah. But then for number 4, for most disappointing, Doriaika / the Watchers. I don't know what it was. Maybe it's just too much in the God sphere. And I was okay with them, but once book 6 and especially book 7 came around, it just became too much good versus evil. And Doriaika, which was a really cool character in book 4, and then I get it that he's becoming the Watcher, but highly dissatisfying ending. Just too much unknown with them, like why they, and he does provide some meaningful, like, I suppose, hard sci-fi explanation for getting rid of them, and it was a cool mechanism, right, with the using the sun to disperse their energy to the point that they can never come back. But Doriaika, based on the evil, not even the evil, right? You kind of sympathize with him a little bit in book 4, but I would have liked to have seen, like, maybe with Doriaika is like he knows that his people are being manipulated, so he's almost, there would have been a little bit more complexity to him. It would have been nice, but yeah, who he becomes in book 4 and how he's presented, then it just dissipates, right? And that's because he's becoming a Watcher or a vessel for the Watcher, and I don't know, it's disappointing for me. I didn't, like, you were always fearing him, and then book 4 he's utterly terrifying, and you see why he has the power that he does, but the ending wasn't very happy with it. So that's why the Watchers and him, just too much on the evil side and too much on the mythical ethos that I'm not really understanding why they're doing what they're doing. So that's why they're number 4. Number 3, we have to put the Emperor, William. Great leader, right? I really loved reading his character arc. He was very wise, and seeing how, I mean, his faith in Hadrian, not necessarily his faith but his usefulness of Hadrian, and just all of his scenes majestic, you know, especially book 7. Just some of those last scenes, I would have liked to have seen, like seen his ending, like seen if he got a peaceful ending or not, or what that meant with, like, Alexander, like, because, you know, his whole life was based on finishing this war. But all of his scenes are majestic. You just feel it thrumming through the pages. All of his scenes, all of his dialogues with Hadrian, all of his moments. And sometimes it's kind of like the Valka thing. I'm like, dude, like, if you know Hadrian, you knew what that meant to him, but it's okay. But yeah, all of this stuff, I have to put William at number 3 for most disappointing or hated. I have to put Cassandra. All the time she's just following her father and being, you know, the same emotional beats of, don't leave me behind, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know, it felt, it was way too repetitive, and she had no character development at all. She was just a good fighter who always ran after her dad, and that was it. And I don't know, it didn't feel like there was any good arc for her or any good meaningful character development for her. And again, that repetitiveness of her just always going after her dad or always being angry at her dad was not that fun and not that enjoyable to read, especially based on the relation, like, what does it mean to be the daughter of him? And there were some hints of that which were cool to see, and sometimes her struggleness of her own individual identity based on her mom, her dad, where she grew up, like, that stuff was cool. But again, not, as is one of the downfalls of the series sometimes, is that not great side character development, and she is definitely on top of that, and also kind of why book 7 was very disappointing based on her arc in that. Number 2 for coolest, favorite, you have to put Karn Sagara in this slot. Like, his arc in this series was awesome. I enjoyed it even in Disquiet Gods. Just the best villain in this series by far. Just the mystery, the intrigue, his development, his place in this universe, his control of the extrasolar Solarians, and then in the end, his fear of, he doesn't want to become immortal because he wants to live forever. He wants to become immortal because he doesn't want to die because of what happens when you die. And just his knowledge of the universe, and then, obviously him being the king that Lorien follows and loves, and his manipulation skills, all of that is just awesome stuff. And I know some people maybe didn't like book 6 where they kind of split off in those two personalities, but I do like that there was a consequence for all of these mechanisms he had in place to preserve himself, so that in the end maybe they weren't, that there was a consequence of that, right? So I didn't mind that, and I still loved his presence in book 6, especially towards the end. But Karn Sagara, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, great villain, the best villain in the series. I would love reading a novella about him, and he was a great addition. Like books 1 and, or he was introduced in book 1. No, he was introduced in book 2. Great character, amazing character, and we only had him for books 2 or 6, but man, did his presence fill the pages. Loved it, absolutely loved it. For number 2, for most disappointing and hating, I have to put Selene. My goodness, Selene, like, she's introduced quite early on, and the foreshadowing, and in the end, it was just, she was a princess in distress, and she really had no meaningful presence, no meaningful development, no meaningful use or skill, either than her being a, like, offspring of this genetic tree related to the emperor. And I don't know, it was really annoying. Selene was very annoying to me. I did not like how she was written or developed. Book 6, especially book 7, just the constant, like, I don't know. And I can understand her admiration for Hadrian and that kind of aspect of it, but in the end, just that it was way too repetitive and highly disappointing, I think, how Selene was written. And I did not like her in book 7 at all. So not a good character at all. I hope that in any future series, if Rockio plays with this kind of character, we get more depth to her. And again, it's not that she's a princess in distress, but there has to be some development. I think of like Sansa Stark a lot. Princess in distress, annoying, but then ends up rising into her own, and we just didn't have that with Selene at all. And so she was just annoying, and with all that foreshadowing with her and Hadrian ending up together, it just felt that there should have been much more there. For number 1, obviously the most loved character is Hadrian Marlowe. It's why we love this series. It's why we're invested in the series. It's why you pay $80, $90, whatever it is, to buy books 1 through 7, to see the ending, see the outcome. And even if I gave 2.5 and was disappointing and thought the ending was flawed, it does not mean I did not enjoy reading through this journey with Hadrian Marlowe. Exceptionally written, great inner monologues, great themes, thought-provoking, was a morally great character, even though we got retconned at the end. I thought if his ending was more geared towards maybe him having too much faith based on the pain and wanting to grasp onto something to have his journey have some kind of meaning, have his sojourn have some kind of meaning, I think that would have been a better outcome here at the end. But in the end, highly disappointed by number 1, or highly loved Hadrian's arc. And yeah, I'll probably reread the series someday in the future, but where I thought I was going to place in my top 5 of all time, it might sneak in the 10 or 9, but I don't think so, just based on this ending. So yeah, that's for number 1 most loved. But for number 1 most hated, most disappointing, I have to put The Quiet. I mean, come on, like, I don't know. I just, when book 6 came around, and I was on board with The Quiet being this super intelligence, but then being this all-knowing creator, I was still on board, but just being this all-good, wanting all-good creator that, I don't know. Just too much good and evil based on what we've already been building up to the series, right? Like, we know that it's morally gray. We know that these things aren't just good and bad, and everything around this is good. And that's what, like, kind of what I was being sold with Hadrian until the end here, where we got retconned with him destroying the Earth or destroying the sun to kill billions of people so that he could maybe save the universe. I would have liked that. Like, we got retconned for that. Sorry, Rockio. But the Quiet, just highly disappointing to me. And again, I say that while saying that was one of the coolest creator themes or creator mechanics I've ever seen in sci-fi by far. Like, it was awesome. It felt very justified, but then 6 and 7, it just, that good versus evil based on what we've seen before, based on everything our characters have experienced, it felt supremely lacking. And the Quiet's arc of and I get it with the Watchers, but I don't know. The mystery was very mysterious, and then it went to the very disappointing level. So again, here's my top 10. I'm just gonna put it on screen. Top 10 most loved, top 10 most hated. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe you think I'm full of shit, doesn't matter, but hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.